Good morning, everyone. My name is Damien Williams, and I'm the U.S. Attorney here in the Southern District of New York. Today I'm announcing the largest single-day bribery takedown in the history of the Justice Department. We have brought bribery and extortion charges against 70 current and former employees of the New York City Housing Authority, otherwise known as NYCHA. As we allege, the 70 defendants charged today allegedly demanded over $2 million in bribe money from contractors in exchange for giving out over $13 million of work on NYCHA buildings. And if the contractors didn't pay up, the defendants wouldn't give them the work. That's classic pay to play, and this culture of corruption at NYCHA ends today. The corruption we've alleged infected every corner of this city. As the charges show, superintendents accepting and extorting bribes from contractors had become business as usual, occurring in almost 100 NYCHA buildings across all 5 boroughs. That's nearly a third of all NYCHA buildings. Now, NYCHA is the largest public housing authority in the country, and it receives over $1.5 billion in federal funding every year. It's home to 1 in 17 New Yorkers. But instead of acting in the interests of NYCHA residents, the city of New York, or taxpayers, the 70 defendants charged today allegedly used their jobs at NYCHA to line their own pockets. As we allege, the 70 defendants all committed these crimes in essentially the same way. Superintendents, assistant superintendents, and others held great power in deciding which contractors would receive small contracts for repair or construction work. These contracts were valued at under $10,000, but they involved essential work in NYCHA buildings, such as plumbing or window repairs. The contracts were sometimes called no-bid contracts because they did not need to go through a competitive bidding process. Instead, the superintendent or assistant superintendent could choose the contractors who would receive these contracts. And that is the power that we allege that these defendants abused. After a contractor finished the work, the superintendent or assistant superintendent needed to sign off on the work so the contractor could get paid by NYCHA. But we allege that these defendants demanded their own cut in the form of cash bribes in order to do their jobs assigning or approving these repairs. Only when the defendants received those cash bribes would they award the contract or sign off on the payment to the contractors. And many contractors paid these bribes because if they didn't, the defendants would give these jobs to someone else. Unfortunately, we allege that this conduct became a regular practice that dozens of NYCHA employees engaged in. If you look over here, this is a map of New York City with all of the NYCHA developments laid out. In the gray, those are the buildings where we do not allege that any corruption took place. The red dots signify the buildings where we allege that a superintendent or an assistant superintendent received or demanded cash bribes. There are nearly 100 dots on this board right here. And there are 335 NYCHA developments across the entire city. So again, that's nearly 1/3 of all NYCHA developments that we allege were involved in some of this corruption. Now I want to make 2 things very clear. First, NYCHA residents deserve better. My office is firmly committed to cleaning up the corruption that has plagued NYCHA for far too long, so that its residents can be served with integrity and have the high-quality, affordable homes that they deserve. Second, I want to emphasize that we are not done. As announced earlier this year, one of my top priorities is to fight the corruption that pollutes our politics and our public institutions. I recently announced a new tool to help us in that fight, a groundbreaking whistleblower program to encourage voluntary self-disclosure of criminal conduct. It's the first whistleblower program ever developed by a U.S. Attorney's Office. People who meet the criteria of the program and report criminal conduct before we find it on our own will be allowed to enter into a non-prosecution agreement in exchange for their cooperation. It gives people a choice. You can come clean quickly and get on the right side of the law, or you can roll the dice, and you can find yourself in handcuffs like the 70 NYCHA employees charged today when we uncover the crime ourselves. You can report the criminal conduct you know about by emailing usanys.wbp@usdoj.gov. And as always, anyone who is aware of wrongdoing in city government, whether you're a contractor, a NYCHA employee, a resident, or anyone else, can report it directly to the New York City Department of Investigation by calling 212-306-3356 or emailing oig.nycha@doi.nyc.gov. Now, contractors who paid NYCHA superintendents should not be afraid to come forward and speak out. As the complaints today made clear, many contractors have already been brave enough to tell law enforcement about the bribes that NYCHA employees demanded of them. Going forward, contractors should understand that NYCHA employees should not be asking for a single penny. And if they do, now you know where to report it. Now, public housing is a vital part of New York's history, present, and future. And those who betray NYCHA, the city, or the taxpayers will be held accountable. Today's charges are a product of tremendous partnership. Nearly 700 law enforcement agents participated in the arrests that took place in New York and elsewhere today. I want to thank our partners at the New York City Department of Investigation, U.S. Department of Homeland Security Investigations, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Office of Inspector General, U.S. Department of Labor, Office of Inspector General, as well as the special agents and task force officers of this office. Now, building a case and executing arrests on this scale has required tremendous resources and dedication, and these agencies have been with us every single step of the way. I also want to thank the New York City Police Department and the U.S. Marshal Service for their assistance with today's arrest. I also want to commend NYCHA. They have already begun to implement changes to root out corruption and have been entirely supportive of our efforts to hold corrupt NYCHA employees accountable. We have worked collaboratively with NYCHA to ensure that today's operation does not significantly disrupt operations at NYCHA. I understand that every current NYCHA employee charged in this takedown will be suspended effective today, and NYCHA has lined up the necessary resources to fill those roles to avoid any disruption in services to NYCHA residents. And last but not least, I want to commend the outstanding career prosecutors from this office who are handling this case. Jerry Fang, Jacob Fiddleman, Meredith Foster, Catherine Ghosh, and Sheb Sweat, and their supervisors, Maureen Comey and Robert Sobelman, the chiefs of the Public Corruption Unit here at SDNY. It's now my pleasure to turn the podium over to the Commissioner of the New York City Department of Investigation, Jocelyn Strauber.
Thank you, Damian. First, I want to recognize the team of Assistant U.S. Attorneys and their supervisors, our federal law enforcement partners at Homeland Security Investigations, and the offices of the Inspectors General for the Department of Housing and Urban Development and for the Department of Labor for their work on this important investigation. And I want to thank the New York City Housing Authority's senior leadership for its prompt and extensive cooperation in this matter. I also want to recognize the investigators and supervisors at DOI's Office of the Inspector General for the New York City Housing Authority who have worked tirelessly on this investigation and brought us here today. Confidential Investigator Karen Smith, Special Investigator Delcine Dosher, Assistant Inspectors General Ennio Ben-Cosme and Robert Joyce, Deputy Inspector General Gregory DeBoer, and Inspector General Ralph Iannuzzi. The complaints unsealed today are striking both in number and in the conduct alleged that NYCHA superintendents, assistant superintendents, and others responsible for the care and maintenance of public housing, a scarce resource in this city, allegedly used their positions of public trust and responsibility to solicit and receive bribes from NYCHA vendors as a cost of doing business, over $2 million in bribe payments in total. The 70 current and former NYCHA staff members charged today in separate bribery schemes touch every borough of New York City and nearly 1/3 of NYCHA's 335 housing developments. The bribery and extortion that is charged here allegedly exploited the no-bid process for goods and services under $10,000, commonly referred to as micro-purchases. That process was intended to ensure swift completion of necessary lower-cost construction and maintenance in the NYCHA developments. The conduct, as alleged, drove up the cost of this kind of work and diverted valuable public funds away from public housing and into the pockets of corrupt NYCHA staff. As in all DOI investigations where misconduct is identified, and particularly where, as here, the conduct is alleged to be widespread, DOI considers the policy and procedural changes that can prevent similar fraud or corruption in the future. To that end, DOI has issued 14 recommendations, and on this effort, I am particularly thankful for the partnership of Lisa Bova-Hyatt, NYCHA CEO, who has committed to make these reforms. DOI's recommendations will be on our website, and we have copies of them with us here today. They focus on reform of the micro-purchase process to protect it from abuse while maintaining efficient service for NYCHA residents, improvement of controls and oversight of that process, and education for NYCHA employees and vendors. Our recommendations include transferring responsibility for micro-purchases from development-level staff to a centralized procurement unit with necessary expertise, standardizing micro-purchase costs by establishing a cost schedule for typical services, with excess costs to be explained in writing by the vendor and approved in writing prior to the commencement of the work by the neighborhood administrator who manages staff at several developments, requiring review by NYCHA staff outside the development of documentation of completed work for all micro-purchases prior to processing payments to vendors. And I want to note that the 3 recommendations that I just mentioned were previously made to NYCHA and ultimately were not implemented. And like I said, NYCHA has committed to implement the recommendations that we are issuing today. Additionally, we recommend creating a pre-qualified list of vendors that must be used for micro-purchases following a vendor integrity review process to be developed jointly by DOI and NYCHA, and requiring that all NYCHA staff involved in the micro-purchase process attend DOI anti-corruption training on city's employees' mandated duty to report corruption and illegal bribery and gratuities. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ivan Arbello. I'm the Special Agent in charge for Homeland Security Investigations in New York. I am proud to be standing alongside my esteemed law enforcement colleagues. We are here to announce indictments of alleged pervasive corruption among employees of the New York City Housing Authority. Today, our agents have executed 65 arrests in 6 states and throughout New York, including all 5 boroughs. These defendants stand accused of bribery and extortion among a range of other charges. They are alleged to have operated similarly to an organized crime network, demanding and accepting kickbacks and bribes for access to no-bid contracts and lucrative under-the-table deals. New York City is the land of opportunity for over 8 million people. Affordable housing makes such aspirations possible for those who might otherwise be unable to call it home. NYCHA provides a place to live for an estimated 1 in 17 New Yorkers. Roughly 500,000 Big Apple residents who spend their days pursuing the American dream rest their heads at night within any of the 335 NYCHA complexes. The NYCHA superintendents arrested today are accused of abusing their power and their access to federal funds to instead gain money and influence. Time and time again, these offenders allegedly enriched themselves at the expense of NYCHA residents and the contractors who were pursuing the real American dream by lining their own pockets through these illegal backdoor deals. Perhaps the most impacted in these cases were the over 200,000 NYCHA residents who lived in the complexes affected by these alleged crimes. These victims may have been cheated out of better services and programs meant to improve their lives because the superintendents were allegedly more interested in a secret payoff than finding the best value for NYCHA. This investigation spanned more than a year. It was the product not only of collaboration among close partners, but of long days and sleepless nights for countless special agents, analysts, and task force officers. Today's historic announcement would not have been possible without the dedicated team that makes up the HSI New York's Document and Benefit Fraud Task Force, a specialized group of agencies that include the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Office of the Inspector General, the New York City Department of Investigations, the U.S. Department of Labor Office of the Inspector General, and the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. As one of the largest investigative agencies, the public can rest assured, we at Homeland Security Investigations will pursue all avenues of justice for the people of this great city. Make no mistake, The American dream is alive and well here, and we pledge to do whatever we can to make sure that doesn't change. Thank you.
Good morning. As the Inspector General for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, I am proud to join this group announcing the unsealing of charges against 70 current and former New York City Housing Authority superintendents who have allegedly exploited the trust placed in them by the citizens of New York City, the residents living in NYCHA housing, and the American taxpayers. I want to thank our law enforcement partners that contributed to these arrests, including U.S. Attorney Williams, his outstanding group of prosecutors, as well as Homeland Security Investigations, the New York City Department of Investigation, and my colleagues at the Department of Labor, Office of the Inspector General. HUD supports NYCHA with over $1.5 billion each year to support 1 in 17 New Yorkers with the housing assistance that they need. My office is initiating an audit of NYCHA's efforts to identify, combat, and prevent corruption and fraud. We will make recommendations that will assist NYCHA in promoting an overall culture that is anti-fraud. Fraud and the failure to identify the risk of fraud stands in the way of the ultimate success of these most important housing programs. My office is determined to help the department and public housing authorities remain vigilant and develop tools they need to guard against this type of corruption. This pay-to-play bribery scheme, alleged in the complaints unsealed today, waste millions of dollars and risk residents staying in unacceptable living conditions. The alleged conduct harms the effectiveness of housing programs that support more than 200,000 NYCHA residents. This conduct also poses a significant risk to the integrity and reputation of the HUD rental assistance program here in New York City and throughout the country. And this conduct ultimately erodes the trust of NYCHA residents and all beneficiaries of HUD's programs. In addition to this targeted audit work that I'm announcing here today, we'll continue to prioritize oversight and partnerships that enhance quality living conditions for those living in HUD-assisted housing. And our team of HUD OIG law enforcement agents will continue to work cases like this one in hopes of deterring and eliminating corruption in HUD's important housing programs. Thank you again to U.S. Attorney Williams, HSI, DOI, and Labor OIG for your leadership and commitment to prosecuting this case. I also want to thank our investigative team at HUD OIG under the supervision of Acting Special Agent in Charge Janine Rushlow and Retired Special Agent in Charge Christina Scaringi for their hard work and truly tireless efforts in bringing these charges. Thank you.
Okay, we can take some questions.
Hi, Kimberly from Channel 7. 4 questions.
4 questions.
Yeah, quickly.
Okay.
You said the investigation was about a year, but do we have an idea of how far back and how long this was going on? An idea of the average amount these assistant supers and supers were getting? And in terms of NYCHA, how were these people able to just freely do this? It sounds like there was no oversight. And in terms of the work done, you said that the conditions in the apartments, like, how did that affect people living? Was the paint, the conditions?
Okay, so that's a lot. Not everyone can have 4. So the conduct that we allege kind of spans 70 different instruments. So it's not all the same, but the earliest conduct I think is from 2013 and spans until 2023. So up until very recently. In terms of the average dollar amount, a lot of these superintendents, as we allege, were taking a portion of the total contract amount. The contracts are relatively small, so sometimes the cash payments would be, $500 to $2,000, somewhere in that range. But of course, it added up, given the span of the conduct here, to about $2 million in bribes that were paid overall. Obviously, the commissioner spoke to some of the reforms that are being put in place. I don't want to, identify exactly where they went wrong. I think we've identified that something did go massively wrong here, given the fact that we have, charged 70 people with this conduct. But going forward, there are a host of reforms that the commissioner laid out that hopefully NYCHA will be adopting to make sure this doesn't happen again. In terms of the impact on the residents, the work that was contracted to be done was done. That's what we have found. But again, that doesn't mean that this is a crime without a harm. the taxpayers of the city, people's faith in government. When you see this kind of conduct, it erodes public trust in a way that's really sad, and we're already in a time where public trust is low enough. Okay, next question.
Greg Smith from the city.
I think this is a Jocelyn question.
Okay,
Possible.
not offended at all.
So you said that you guys had made recommendations before, those 3 recommendations that you just spelled out, which go to the heart of this thing. When did you do that? Why did you do it? And when did this particular investigation start?
Those recommendations that I referred to were made in September of 2021. As you know, there were other recommendations, over the years made to the procurement process, but the specific ones that I mentioned, September of 2021, they were made in connection with actually a case that was brought in Brooklyn with the Brooklyn DA's office, charging 9 contractors with misconduct in connection with the micro-purchase process. And in terms of the beginning of this investigation,
I can't give
I
you
don't-
a precise date, but
Approximately.
well, we brought federal charges in 2022 against 2 NYCHA superintendents. That was also pretty well covered, and we have been investigating nonstop since then.
Okay, next. Pix 11, please speak into the mic.
Hi, Henry Rossoff, Pix 11. Is it working? Okay. We heard you praise, several of you, NYCHA leadership, but to put a fine point on this, does any of this alleged corruption extend into the senior ranks of NYCHA leadership or the Adams administration? And in addition, do any of the contractors or supers or assistant supers have a nexus to your investigation into the mayor's campaign finances?
So let me just answer the question that I can answer, which is no, it doesn't touch the senior leadership of NYCHA. What we have alleged is misconduct by the superintendents or assistant superintendents. Those are the schemes that we've alleged, and we've alleged nothing more. Next question.
Lisa Evers.
Lisa Evers, Fox 5. Mr. Williams, do you have any indication that these bribery schemes extended into some of the major contractors, like the ones that were being called in to do mold repair remediation or fixing the leaky roofs that many of the residents have had to deal with over the years?
So I'm not able to get into that. Everything that we're able to say in terms of who the contractors are contained in our charging instruments or in our public statements that we'll be making in court. So I can't give you more information than that.
But the investigation's ongoing.
Obviously it is. We never stop. Next question.
Eric Katursky, ABC.
I do. So, for 10 years, there's been this endemic corruption in NYCHA. Are these federal charges because it's because of federal oversight? Can you explain a little bit about how that works?
Well, look, I think we have not, this is not the first case that's been brought alleging this type of corruption in NYCHA. Jocelyn mentioned a case of the Brooklyn DA brought back in 2021. We obviously brought a case in 2022. What we have found is that the conduct has continued, and that is absolutely unacceptable. And so we, here in this office with our law enforcement partners, really leaned in, dedicated the resources necessary to do this kind of sweeping takedown that we hope will send a message and make sure that you don't find us back at a podium like this again, announcing more charges like this. That's why I said that the culture of corruption at NYCHA needs to end today. Next question.
Hi, Jennifer with CBS. Does this investigation stop at 70? Could there be more of these superintendents, assistant superintendents that we can see face charges down the line? Are you looking into more NYCHA buildings and properties?
We are absolutely continuing the investigation. That's why I issued the call for people to come forward. If there are contractors who are paying bribes, who have paid bribes to NYCHA employees and have not yet spoken to us, we strongly encourage them to come forward now. If you are a NYCHA employee who has demanded or received a bribe, they have an obligation under the law to report it to DOI. They should do that. And any resident who is aware of this kind of conduct should also feel comfortable coming forward. It's really important that we put a stop to this once and for all. Next question.
Thanks. Last question, Ben Kochman.
Hey,
I think Greg should get a question after. But, okay, these recommendations were allegedly made in September 2021. What has been going on from then until now? Why have they not been implemented? And is it basically now that there's indictments, suddenly they're going to change?
Well, I'm going to look to Jocelyn to take this one.
I can't speak to precisely the rationale for the failure to implement the recommendations we previously made. What I can say is that there were reforms made to the micro purchase process. They, in our view, did not go far enough, and I think the fact that we're here today shows that they did not go far enough. And yes, I think what has happened today will be tremendously impactful, and our hope, as the U.S. Attorney said, is that this will put a stop to this. NYCHA has committed to implementing the reforms that we are currently recommending, and we're optimistic that they will do so.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you ask, I'm just reading this and I'm trying to think, so this stuff's going on, and you guys, there's a DA case, and then you guys did the two guys in the elevator in 2022. And so everybody knows this is going on. I mean, and obviously, it's going on everywhere. What triggered this organized effort to try to put it all together in one place? And I think that's for...
Yeah, so what triggered it is because this is classic bread and butter SDNY work with our law enforcement partners. It's kind of old-fashioned dig, and put things together as you find it. The AUSAs here, up here, there are a number of them. I think it's an unusual number because this is an unusual case. Our public corruption unit is always thinking about ways that they can bring impactful cases. And if it requires more resources, we add more resources to get it done. We were trying to send a message with a 70 person takedown, a message that can't be missed by anyone out there who thinks that this behavior is acceptable or will be tolerated. Right here, right now, they should know that it won't be. So that's why we do what we do. That's why we're announcing these actions today. And again, I hope this finally puts an end to this culture of corruption in the micro contract process at NYCHA. All right, thank you, everyone.